Hi everyone. In this video I wanted to talk about postpartum depression. When I was pregnant and I first heard and read about postpartum depression and the baby blues, it seemed like something out there. Just even the words postpartum depression, like all the Latinness in there, like it's some specialized condition, put me off. And also the wording seems to localize the experience to only having to do about after the birth and the separation of baby and mother from the womb. But for myself, did I go through postpartum depression? Yes, I did. I went through periods of lots of crying. I was exhausted mentally and physically. Interesting thing is that looking back, I should have known. In that when I first found out that I was pregnant, I was freaking the fuck out. And I was crying. I was petrified. Because knowing that I was pregnant brought out all these insecurities, that inherent belief that I'm not adequate enough, that I have no self-trust, no self-confidence, and I'm just going to fail at this miserably, no question about it. And that same signature, that experience of finding out that I was pregnant and that panic was the same signature that I experienced after the birth. Because it's not about the afterbirth experience and, you may get depressed because of the hormonal changes, and if you do, just let people know so we can just contain that, because unstable moms scare us. What I found for myself was that it's not about that small little period after the birth. Having a child, and especially if it's your first, you're faced with an existential crisis. In that moment of having a child, you're not just faced with, the child is leaving my body and all these things happening. You're dealing with the very question of existence, why we are here, why are we doing the things we do? Because whatever meaning we have given life, whatever meaning we have given to ourselves, is going to be reflected in our parenting. It's the framework that determines everything. And at the same time, in asking that question, you're faced with the meaning and framework that your parents gave to life. If life on earth for them was all about survival, competition, just making it, really being part of the human race, and you gotta be a winner, then it's gonna translate into your parenting, because it's going to define how you feed your child, how you educate your child, how much you praise your child, how much you break them down, how much you compare them to others. It's going to frame everything. And as much as you're now asking yourself that question about who are you going to be, who do you want your child to be, what are you doing here with a child on earth, all your entire childhood, your entire development, everything that comes with that comes back to the surface. All these undealt with issues, all those self-sabotaging beliefs, all those limiting perceptions that we have about ourselves come, and what comes to mind is like a paint bucket that's been kept under high pressure, and now someone put a hole in it and it just splatters all over the walls. And that's then the postpartum experience where everything is just so intense and emotional and you're all over the place. And it's not that is a new experience, because if you look at the paint bucket example again, the paint was already there, but it was just contained. And having a child, becoming a mother, just presents the opportunity for that to come out, full force, full view, everywhere around you. And the fact that you go through that emotional experience and that really deep feeling is not a bad thing, because you're actually really being honest about how you experience yourself, how you have been experiencing yourself all your life, and you are willing to look at those questions even though they hurt, even though it's so uncomfortable, even though you just had a child, a huge responsibility. You know, other mothers may breeze through the initial stages of birth and having a baby, but maybe it's because they're not asking those questions. Maybe those questions came up, but they managed to keep that lid closed. It doesn't mean it's not there. So we also have to be very careful about comparing ourselves to other people, other mothers, what they went through, did not go through. But for me, I know that what I went through is equal and one to my own experience of what I have been living, how I was brought up, the conflict with that was always there when I was brought up. And the thing is that when I first went through panic, when I found out that I was pregnant, you know, it was just initially, and then you manage and you work with it. But at the same time, it's also because you know on a level, well, it's 9 months from now. I have time. And, you know, for myself, I worked with what I could. I asked myself a lot of questions about my own relationship with my mother. What's the type of mother I want to be? What are the fears that are coming up? And just kind of already start preparing myself for what's to come. But when you have the actual baby, I mean, it's like you have no idea what's in that paint bucket and the colors that's going to come out. You know there's stuff there, but you don't know what it is, because you've been keeping it in the dark. And there's nothing that can prepare you for that. Like, you can prepare yourself to the best of your ability, and there will still be things coming up. And then another interesting thing is that, you know, after 2 years, that's when kind of like my son started to settle. He had all his teeth, his major growth, physical growth points were done with. He got more stable. I started getting some proper sleep and kind of settling to a normal life routine again. And I was like, I can rest now. And then shit started hitting the fan again. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I've got all these pains, all these anxieties, fears, depressions. Where is this coming from? And then I talked to a friend of mine, and she said, look, from what I can see, everything you're experiencing now goes back to your pregnancy. It goes back to, you know, those first initial months after birth, where there's, you know, so much shit comes up, and you just don't have enough time. You don't have enough space to work with it, because, you know, you gotta tend to yourself. You've gotta tend to your child, and you do the best that you can. And it's like your body knows and goes, okay, we'll just scrape all this paint off, put it back in the bucket, and we'll work with it later. So 2 years was my later. And it all came back, and I'm still working through many of those points, because, you know, it's an existential crisis. It's a big point. It's a big question. And it's a very cool opportunity, really, to get to know yourself better, to really answer those questions of why you're here, what do you want to create, what do you want to create for your children, what kind of person do you want your child to be, because that's going to determine everything that you do with your child. I mean, another friend of mine, she had like awful childhood. She grew up in the slums, third world country. You know, there was death, panic, conflict, violence, fear. That was like the background music to her life. And now that she's living in a first world country, you know, she's not in that survival mode. She had 2 kids, and yeah, initially there was a lot of emotional turmoil, but it settled down, and the kids got to a certain age, and it's like her mind and body just started shutting down. Panic attacks, you know, deep stuff, because with my own childhood, I know it was a tumultuous and conflictual childhood, and that was reflected in my postpartum experience, and equally for her, because her childhood had been so rough. Her, you know, who she is and her self-definition is so defined by those childhood experiences that that's what comes up, because that's what you need to work through. That's what's going to shape the rest of your life and your children's lives. And to use that opportunity where everything comes up, work through it, don't judge yourself for it, because like I said before, this is you actually really being in touch with yourself, allowing yourself to feel, to ask those questions. And I think if we can stop looking at postpartum depression as this clinical condition that only happens, you know, for this little period after birth, but see it for what it is, as an existential crisis that really actually started from the moment you were born. And it's not just about those few months, it's about the very core of your being. And we don't necessarily have to change the name, but give it a different name, like existential crisis, or, you know, being faced with who I am crisis, instead of like a mental condition. I think we would all look at these points a lot more and be a lot more open about it and share about it. Because now it's like, oh, that mom has postpartum depression. Like, and we start tiptoeing around them, and like we don't want to set them off, and it's such a delicate thing. Like, no, I mean, that's not how I would want to work with it. I don't want other people to do that with me. Just talk about it for what it is. Talk about the hard questions you are facing. Talk about the truth of yourself that you are facing. For me, honestly, for the first time, getting that raw feedback and use it. All right, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please do share. Bye bye.